Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Trade Block, our monthly Dynasty Discord show. I am Ryan Wormeli, joined as always by Pat Fitzmaurice. Fitz, we are into June. How are you doing, buddy?
Good. Seems like the season is barreling down on us, Worm. Like it's not going to be too long before we are consuming training camp news, getting our first injuries, unfortunately. Well, I suppose we've had a few in OTAs already, but nothing major, fortunately. Yeah, it's, enjoy the off time while you can because the season's going to be here before you know it.
How much did you move down Kyle Pitts in your rankings when you found out he had a foot issue at OTAs today?
I've been trying not to move him down, and I hate to say it, but I'm like, I'm starting to feel like I should be back in on Pitts now that everyone is off him. And needs more cowbell is in our chat right now saying, love Pat's take on Pitts. What's a good value to send for Pitts as player ranges like wide receiver 3 and picks? All right, we'll get to that in a second, cowbell. But yeah, like I think the dude's only 24. Still one of only 3 rookie tight ends ever to have a 1,000-yard season. First since Mike Ditka's 60 years earlier, then Brock Bowers did it last year. But I'm not totally giving up on him. And maybe last year we could make the excuse that it was his first year in Zach Robinson's offense and that Kirk Cousins was pretty washed, as we saw. And I'm, like Michael Penix Jr. was a kingmaker for his pass catchers at the University of Washington. So maybe there's hope for Kyle Pitts yet, Worm. And I know that's the eternal optimist in me saying that, but I'm prepared for the scorn that's going to be heaped on me for that viewpoint.
We did a reel on Instagram last year that did very good numbers. It got like 3 million views or something. And it was just a clip from a show that the caption was drafting Kyle Pitts this year. And the clip was the guy saying, but this time it's different. And that was the whole reel. And that was a season prior to the one we just got last year. Like that was a year ago and people were already making jokes. I mean, for 2 years now, it feels like the jokes have been coming in, let alone however many years of the frustration. So
that's the crazy thing. But like he's 24 and we've seen Jonnu Smith just had a year 8 breakout. David Njoku had like a year 6 or 7 breakout a couple of years ago. Like it's not too late for Kyle Pitts.
Let's start with the tight ends since we're talking about Pitts already, and we'll kind of go in reverse order. Just so everybody knows, the way we usually handle this show is the first 30-ish minutes or so are going to be Pat and I running through the Dynasty Trade Value Chart, which updates on the first of every month. So that just updated a couple of days ago for June. And we actually have some fun additions that I'll get into in a second to the chart this month. So I would highly encourage everybody to check that out. Again, it's the FantasyPros Dynasty Trade Value Chart. Gets updated every single month. So about the first 30 minutes of the show, we'll go through that and kind of our reactions to some of the changes since the last time we did this. And then the second half of the show, we will be answering all of your questions. It can be questions where we bring you up onto our Discord stages. You can be live on the show talking to us about some of your questions. You can also feel free to throw questions in the chat. We will get through pretty much all of them. We will go through as many as we possibly can here in the course of the full hour. We usually start with the quarterbacks, but yeah, let's mix it up and start with the tight ends because we were talking about Kyle Pitts already. And also because one of those fun new additions is we have tight end premium values. We have been getting people requesting this for a while now. We now have it. So, of course, under the quarterback section, we already had kind of that super flex value second column. This is going to look the same way on the Dynasty page as kind of a second column going with sort of the main quote-unquote value. But this one will say TEP. That's, of course, tight end premium. And it will show how much more we are valuing these players in said formats. So I do want to ask, Brock Bowers, we don't need to talk about him being first amongst tight ends. That's obvious. This is my 4th straight month. Well, I'll tell you, I don't think the gap is wide enough between him and everybody else. But what I really want to ask is in tight end premium, how do you square his value compared to some of the elite wide receivers and whatnot? His tight end premium value is 82 in our system. To put that in context, that would be tied for third. CeeDee Lamb and Malik Neighbors are both tied at 82 amongst the receivers, behind only Chase and Jefferson, who are up in the low 90s. If you look at running backs, also it's higher than any of them. Bijan is the highest at 75. And, of course, it's higher than any quarterbacks in 1 QB It's right around like what would be considered something like the 12th or 11th quarterback in Superflex. So it is an elite value we are putting on Brock Bowers in tight end premium, unsurprisingly.
Yeah, so the value bump that tight ends get from tight end premium worm is typically around 20%, because you get that extra half point for your receptions, but like it's not a 150%. It's not that tight ends are 150% more valuable in tight end premium because they're also scoring points in other ways, from touchdowns, from yardage. So it's 20% in most cases, and I think Bowers was even above 20% last year because he had, 112 receptions, most by a tight end since Zach Ertz set the single-season record in 2018. So, yeah, like that bumps him up on our chart to 82, which puts him like in a tight end premium league. Say it's a tight end premium super flex league. He's on par with like Bo Nix and Jordan Love for value there. Good, like promising young quarterbacks. We have him valued ahead of Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs in tight end premium. Like a 21-year-old tight end who, with one of the worst quarterback situations in the league, was the runaway tight end one, and feel like things are only going to get better for Bowers from here. Like, we might just be scratching the surface of what this dude could do. Not out of the question he gives us a 1,400-yard season, a 120-catch season. Certainly the touchdown total could go up, especially with more competent quarterbacking. So, yeah, like, I think we got it right with the tight end premium value being pretty substantial here.
I think, if anything, it's too low. Like, I'm really struggling to make the case for myself if I was in a startup that was tight end premium. I'm struggling to make the case for more than 5. Even in Superflex, I'm saying, for more than 5 names ahead of him. Like, that elite trio of quarterbacks, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, I think would go ahead of him rightfully. Jamar Chase. I would even hear the argument him versus Justin Jefferson. Like, I don't see any reason to think what he did last year is illegitimate. I don't see any reason to think it won't get better in a better offense now. And if you told me that he was going to have Travis Kelce's career, first of all, I wouldn't think that was crazy. And second of all, I would say that guy should be maybe the number 1 pick in a tight end premium startup if you're getting Travis Kelce at 22 years old. So I'm just really struggling. Like, again, that elite trio of quarterbacks, Chase and maybe Jefferson. I don't think anybody else I would even remotely consider ahead of him in a startup. Just as a fun exercise. Again, I know I don't need to make the case to people why Brock Bowers is good, but I really think that this is even arguably too low in that format.
Yeah, that's fair. And, right now we have his tight end premium value the same as Malik Neighbors' value. And I agree with you. I would take Bowers over Malik Neighbors in a startup if it was tight end premium.
He absolutely, his floor for me in a startup is 6th pick. Like, there's no chance he's getting past 6 if I'm in that league. That's just he's just that good. Everybody already knows that. We obviously still have Trey McBride ranked very highly. Laporta is tight end 3. Colston Loveland tight end 4. Tyler Warren tight end 5. Kittle at 6. Obviously that's due to the age. Hockenson at 7. Then you start to get into kind of your favorite high upside guys. We have Kraft at 8, Mark Andrews at 9, and Njoku 10, Kincaid 11, Kyle Pitts 12. You could make, I think, cases for a bunch of different orders once you get past the top 7 or so. Isaiah Likely up at tight end 13. I like quite a bit as well. I think that's a very smart high upside play given the contract situation of the 2 tight ends in Baltimore. Does anybody else stand out to you? I mean, like I said, I definitely wanted to hit on Bowers just because we have that tight end premium value ranking now. But as far as kind of the order amongst the tight ends, does anybody stand out to you as a guy that is maybe too high or too low?
TJ Hockenson, I think, is too high. That's one, and we're going to talk about this on our regular Dynasty show this week. Like, I don't really understand his value of 41. I just, Hockenson is a good player, although it took him a little while to pop. But, now he's starting to get older. He's maybe a little past prime or moving into that past prime territory. He's had a major knee injury that cost him part of last season. Came back and, did okay, but didn't set the world on fire. And he has to share targets with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. And those targets are going to be coming from a quarterback who's never started an NFL game. So we have his value being the same as, for instance, like TJ Hawkinson's value is higher than Luther Burden's on our chart. And I would rather have Luther Burden 7 days a week over TJ Hockenson.
Let's wrap up the tight end conversation with a little bit more of a chat on Pitts, because we did get that question from Cowbell about kind of what a good value would be to send for Pitts. Player ranges. He threw out the possibility maybe like wide receiver 3 and picks. If you look at his value in non-tight end premium, he's at a 31, which equates to what would be the wide receiver 50, because Keon Coleman's wide receiver 49 at a value of 32. Calvin Ridley's right after him at a value of 28. So it would be like outside of that top a wide receiver 4. You'd be into the wide receiver 5 range. So that's a little bit lower than kind of he was throwing out there. In tight end premium, he'd be a bit higher. He'd be up near low end wide receiver 3 range, would be about equivalent to Trey Harris or Tyreek Hill, to get two ends of the age curve there. Does that sound right to you in terms of if you were looking to make a trade? Premium versus non-premium, those are the types of names that you think are reasonable to be trading for Pitts. Would you want to maybe go lower and throw a pick in there? Would you try and do a 1-for-1 trade if you were trying to make that happen?
So if we were going to throw a pick out, just trade a pick for Kyle Pitts, like I think a second in 2026 would be perfectly fair. We actually have Pitts ranked higher than an early second round pick in 2026. We have the value for Pitts being slightly higher than that. But, if someone's really disgusted with Pitts and has been let down by them for a couple of years running in Dynasty, they might be willing to cash out now and take that second rounder for him. And I'm sorry, Worm, what were some of the other names you mentioned? Like his value is the same as what? James Conner?
In non-tight end premium amongst the receivers, it's guys like Calvin Ridley, Keon Coleman were the two he'd be sandwiched between. Josh Downs is near there. Cortland Sutton is near there. Jalen Noel is near there. Those are the guys that are closest to him in non-tight end premium. In tight end premium, it'd be like Trey Harris, Tyreek Hill, Jaden Higgins. Luther Burden is just barely ahead of him. And then if you're looking at the running back position, non-tight end premium, it's like Connor, Bashal Tutin, Charbonnet, Scadaboo. And if you make it tight end premium, some of those equivalents are Chuba Hubbard, David Montgomery. It's like running back 22, running back 21-ish range if you're in a tight end premium league.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends on what your objective is, but I think Pitts is a decent target for a worthwhile risk for a team that's trying to rebuild. And if he finally does hit, that could kind of kickstart the rebuild, make it go a little faster. So, like, to me, James Conner is kind of a good trade, because like a win now team is going to be attracted to a player like James Conner, who could deliver like low end running back 1 value this year, but probably does not have more than like about 2 more productive seasons left. So I think that would be a pretty fair exchange. And I think we mostly get it right with some of these other. I think people are so down on Kyle Pitts that most of those names you mentioned, Worm, Cortland Sutton, Keon Coleman, Calvin Ridley, I think in most cases people are going to go for all those players over Kyle Pitts, just because Kyle Pitts' name is mud in dynasty circles, in fantasy circles, redraft, dynasty, whatever.
I have Pitts in a dynasty league with Bowers. So I'm like, I can easily trade Pitts because I have Bowers already at the position, but I feel like I'm just selling low for no reason, honestly. Like, I don't need the roster space. So I feel like I kind of just want to sit on him and see if maybe we get a bounce back this year, only 24 years old, and then there's more value, or I have this really high end backup. I think I want to be on the side of buying really, really low, rather than selling on the cheap is kind of my approach with him.
Agreed.
At the moment, let's look at some other positions here. That might be the longest we've ever gone on the tight ends on this version of the show. We'll jump back up to quarterbacks. Does anybody stand out to you here? I mean, obviously the elite remains the elite. No value change there. I think I really want to be living in this range of this, QB 7 to QB 15-ish, I think is a real nice sweet spot. If I'm going to start up, I kind of want to get like 3 of those guys if I can, in a super flex format I'm talking about. Guys like Justin Fields still seem pretty low. There's obviously a lot of downside, but clearly some short-term upside as long as he has a starting position. I'm looking at like Bryce Young, I think is undervalued down at QB 23. This is kind of just me jumping around without like a real focus because there just hasn't been that much movement. Does anybody stand out to you that you think is really worth hitting on?
Yeah, Fields is interesting. He did get a little bump in the last value change, but so I think his rushing ability makes him a potential QB1 this year. The only problem is that like he's got to boost the passing or he's going to not last as a starter and have zero value 2 years from now. And like trying to calibrate that, the immediate potential value versus the potential huge loss of value and having an asset wiped off your books in a couple of years. Because like Fields didn't play horribly last year, but he knew he wasn't good enough as a passer last year in Pittsburgh. And when he got benched, he was like, yeah, I deserve to be benched. And like what happens if we see something similar in New York where they have this audition in the 2025 season and Fields doesn't give them what they think they need in terms of his passing? Like, they're going to make a move at quarterback. And I know Fields is on like a 2-year deal, but they're just they're not committed to him for 2 years. They're committed to him for this year, and that's about it. So he's a risky proposition. And, we moved Dak Prescott up. I think part of that was related to the George Pickens acquisition, bumped him up a little bit. And I noticed we bumped up Bo Nix, which I like. I'm starting to warm to Bo Nix. Right now we've got Jordan Love value just a smidge higher than Nix in both Superflex and 1QB. And I'm not sure if that's right, Worm. I mean, like Nix had a really convincing rookie season, and it just kind of kept getting better and better as the year went on. So I do think there might be a little bit of regression in year 2, but long term, I like the outlook.
I think it's appropriate that they're near each other. I think that's a good who do you like better? And I could see I think Knicks probably maybe should be ahead, but I think they should be close.
Yeah. Someone said it on Twitter the other day, like, what if the Packers were so run heavy last year because Jordan Love's knee wasn't right all season after he sprained his MCL in the opener on that ice skating rink in Brazil?
Yeah. It's a good point. We have to ask on the quarterbacks. There was a tremendous debate raging in the FantasyPros Slack channel yesterday about a trade that had gone down in a work league that neither you nor I are in this league, but we both did weigh in on this trade a bit because there was a lot of debate about if it was an egregious, controversial trade. There wasn't any vetoing done. We don't have vetoes in our work leagues typically, but there was a lot of people taking different sides about whether this was a fair deal or not. So the trade was Anthony Richardson and Javonte Williams for a 2026 first and a 2026 third. Now, Javonte, obviously, there's an opportunity there this year to get some volume, but largely is a diminished asset. And a third rounder a year from now in what is somewhat of a weak class, probably not a needle mover. It could be. You never know. It's nice to have picks, but probably not a needle mover. The main crux of it is Anthony Richardson for a 2026 first. You did weigh in Slack, but I want you to weigh in for the people listening here. What was your response to if that was a fair or controversial trade?
Yeah, my point, well, if I were the person trading for Anthony Richardson, well, I'm not trading a 2026 first for Anthony Richardson. But, so Anthony Richardson, like, huge gamble. In year 1, when he was a rookie, he only played like 4 games and, injury abbreviated season. But in those 4 games, like, he was a pretty spectacular scorer because of his rushing ability. And he has massive rushing upside. Like, if he can ever just get to the point where he's serviceable as a passer, like, Richardson is just a lethal runner, and we saw him in his rookie year. Granted, that small 4-game sample size, we saw him score more fantasy points per snap that year than QB1 overall Josh Allen. So, like, that's the upside we're talking about. Now, last year, I mean, Richardson was just a train wreck. You can't be an NFL starter if you're not completing even 50% of your passes. So, we'll see if Shane Steichen can get him straightened out, or if he can even keep his job with Daniel Jones around now. Huge gamble with the potential for a huge payoff for that person making the trade. The only problem is, if you're doing this, like, my understanding was that the person who traded for Anthony Richardson is kind of in a rebuild. Your 2026 first is probably going to be an early first. That's the part I don't like. If, it was going to be a 110 through 112, I'm more okay with it. But, man, if that winds up being a top 3 pick for the team that made the deal, wow. That's
the other thing that's interesting to me is I think it's a 2 QB league. I don't know if they meant Superflex or literally 2 QB when they were describing it, but in a league where you can and should be starting 2 quarterbacks, I worry more about a guy like Richardson. If he hits, the value's even higher, but if he doesn't hit, it hurts you even worse than in 1 quarterback. Like, Richardson is the type of guy I'd rather have in a 1 QB dynasty because he can be a difference maker if he really does hit, and it's harder to find difference makers when only 12 guys are starting. In a Superflex or 2 QB league, you need to have 2 quality quarterbacks, right? Like, if he is not hitting, that hurts you more. So that risk, I'm less of a fan of in that format. I'm a fan of having him on your team and taking that risk, but to give up a first to do so is where I think it gets pretty scary. By the way, speaking of kind of future pick values, the other big update to this year's draft value chart is we now have 2027 pick values in here as well, not just 2025 for those whose drafts haven't happened yet, and 2026, which we always have, but we have another year out now. We have 2027, and I do think it's worth highlighting that normally the closer you are to the pick, the more value it's going to have, but because of the nature of the classes, we have 2027 early picks valued higher than 2026 picks. We have in Superflex, for example, a pick in the top 3 in 2026 is worth 54. In 2027, it's worth 58. So even accounting for the extra year, that is really reflective of Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams, and Arch Manning might wait a year to come out. Like, 2027 is the class to be targeting. And we've talked before in the show, like, you have made the case that, people already know, they don't need to, our listeners are smart enough to know 2027 is the class. And I say, well, maybe the people in their leagues aren't smart enough. So you should be going to try and trade right now. Say, hey, man, I want another year of the rebuild. Here's my 2026 first for your 2027 first. If you can, if you're in a position where you're willing to wait a year and be patient, I can't recommend that enough. And the class will change, right? Like, what it looks like next March versus today for the 2026 class, for example, will be different. That happens every year. But right now, it sure looks like 2027 is the class.
It does look that way, Worm. And that's why, with the early first-round picks, which is top 3, basically, and then picks 4 through 6, we would rather have those picks for 2027 than those picks for 2026. Because 2027 looks like a ridiculously stacked class. And 2026, I don't know if it's going to be a great rookie draft next year, guys. So, I mean, even despite the fact that you're waiting an extra year, I think those 2027 picks are more valuable. I mean, Jeremiah Smith, Ryan Williams, just, prolific performers at a very young age. I mean, Ryan Williams, didn't he play some games last year at age 17?
Yeah, really young.
Yeah, maybe Arch Manning is in that class, maybe 2026. DJ Lagway, Cam Coleman.
Julian Sayin at Ohio State.
There's
just
Bryant
a lot
Wesco
of
of Clemson. Dylan Raiola from Nebraska is in that class. So a lot of interesting players for 2027. I think that is going to be a mega class.
It feels similar to a couple years out how we were talking about the 2024 class, and that ended up being very prescient. That ended up being the right class to trade into. getting guys like Caleb and May and Daniels and Bowers and Neighbors. That was the correct move, and I feel similarly about 2027.
Agreed.
By now, most of you have probably heard of Reality Sports Online, the powerful fantasy sports platform where owners get to build and manage their fantasy team like an NFL general manager. But the question is, have you tried it? It's time to go see what all the buzz in the Dynasty community is about. Free agency, multi-year contracts, a rookie draft, multi-team trades, franchise tags, contract extensions, first-round rookie options, automated contract and salary cap functionality, and much, much more. Think it sounds complicated? It's not. The best thing about Reality Sports Online Fantasy Front Office is that it doesn't take any more time than a standard league. It just requires more strategy. Think you're among the fantasy elite? Well, this is the platform to test your mettle. If you're still not sure, you can test out your general manager skills for free in a mock free agency auction. If you like what you see, use promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. That's promo code FantasyPros to receive a 10% discount on your team or league today. Fantasy just got real at realitysportsonline.com. All right, Fitz, let's go a little quicker through the running backs and receivers just because there's not a ton of movement this time of year. Looking at the running backs first here, same guys at the top, no change there. Really very minimal change throughout the top, 17-ish. Really, depending on how you define minimal change, really the top 25 or so, there's really not much going on. You see some of the rookies maybe moving around a bit as you get further down in the rankings. Guys like Bashal Tutin and Cam Scadaboo have gone up a bit, but it's largely kind of staying with where it's at. So why don't we say, don't tell me the player that you disagree with most, because we were going to be diving into that later on this week, and I want to let that serve as a tease for the episode with you, me, and Bogman that will be dropping later in the week. But who are some of the names that stand out to you as, at the very least, interesting conversation topics for where they're ranked?
Yeah, so, I think we did what we needed to do in adjusting some of the rookie running backs upward with Caleb Johnson, Cam Scadaboo, Bashal Tutin, Jarquez Hunter. Those guys got pretty significant bumps, so I agree with all of that. I don't know. I feel like we've got things right. Like, we've got Christian McCaffrey. I think his value, and he's always been kind of like a bellwether guy for me when I look at our rankings and compare him to players with similar value, because Christian McCaffrey is a really hard player to appraise. Like, he's got potentially immense immediate value, but like the clock feels like it's ticking with him with his injury history. So, but I feel like we came down in the right spot with him with a value of 47, which is akin to Ricky Pearsall, a young player. Like, I think that would be a pretty fair exchange between a win now team and a rebuilding team.
Let me ask you, Breece Hall. He's the 8th most valued running back in these rankings, 57. He went down a slight bit, but he didn't change ranking. It was just there's a little bit more of a gap between him and the top 7 now, but very minimal there. Like I said, 8th most valuable running back at a value of 57. That's equivalent on the receiver side to looking at guys like Travis Hunter and T. Higgins. It's the equivalent of about a Trey McBride in non-tight end premium. And then if you're looking at kind of like the quarterback side of things to give an equivalent, it will be more valuable than any QB in a 1 QB league. But then it gets down into that Cam Ward, Dak Prescott, Justin Fields range in a super flex format. Again, that's all comparing with Breece Hall. I find Hall to be really fascinating because a year ago, this was like a top 3 dynasty running back, and there was a lot of excitement for him. And now it feels like a lot of that shine has worn off, at least in terms of the redraft conversation. I've done a lot of shows in the last few weeks where it feels like he's somebody that people are pointing to as a guy they're kind of avoiding in the range he's going, a guy who they wish was going around later, a guy who they're not really excited to go after in that Jets offense. And I'm wondering, because that doesn't seem to line up. If you're already starting to fade a running back in redraft, I'm not sure why they're still a top 8 guy in Dynasty, just kind of philosophically. Having said that, I'm not sure it's the right decision to be fading him as much as he is getting faded in redraft. So maybe this is kind of standing against that a bit, and this ranking is maybe reflective of just there's still some upside in there. It was such a lost season last year for that offense that I don't want to hold it against him too much. They've also talked a lot about, using Braylon Allen and Isaiah Davis, so I totally get the negative kind of side of things too. I guess this is a lot of rambling to build up to the point of just asking you, what do you think about him, both in terms of the value and in terms of the ranking amongst running backs for dynasty purposes?
I think we have it right as far as, the drop in value we've seen from this time a year ago, Worm. Just coming off the disappointing season, and we've got Aaron Glenn basically in a very straightforward way telling us that he wants to use a committee. But at the same time, Breece Hall is still young. I think he just turned 24 a couple days ago. He's a pretty terrific prospect, only slightly below the level of like Bijan Robinson, Ashton Genty, and Saquon Barkley. And like he delivers value as a pass catcher. He's had 133 catches the last 2 years. So that pays off in Dynasty, since almost all Dynasty leagues are PPR. I'd like to think we haven't seen his best season yet. Like, we have not gotten a 1,000-yard rushing season from Breece Hall, and I do feel like there's one in him. I just don't know if it comes with the Jets.
I'm looking at some of the other names around him. Like, if I'm in win now mode, I think I'd rather have Chase Brown than him, and Brown is a few spots lower. And if I'm in rebuilding mode, I think I'd rather have Travion Henderson, and he's also a couple spots behind Breece Hall. So he's kind of in that weird middle ground where I don't know what kind of roster he fits best based on what we've seen out of him recently, I guess is kind of where my confusion is.
Agreed. Yeah, he is a strange purgatory player.
Yes, I think that's right. Any quick thoughts on the receivers just as a whole, or if any name stands out? Again, there's really not much change here. Garrett Wilson went up a few ticks, which I agree with. I think Wilson is kind of getting slept on a bit in the dynasty community right now. I really like him being paired with Justin Fields. What we saw happened, obviously, not just at Ohio State, but then Fields with his top receiver in DJ Moore when he was in Chicago. I'm really excited about Garrett Wilson this year. A lot of these names from 9 to 13 is Drake London, Ladd McConkey, JSN, Marvin Harrison Jr., Garrett Wilson. Just a lot of young, really talented receivers that you could see taking steps forward. There's not really a stretch of the receiver rankings that stands out as, wow, I don't know how to parse through these guys. It feels pretty appropriate all the way down. Does anybody stand out to you, or can we kind of move past the position?
Yeah, we can move past it. We dropped some of the older guys. Tyreek Hill, how is he? I think last year planted some real seeds of doubt in our heads. And, these are based largely on the rankings of myself, Derek Brown, Andrew Erickson. And we've also heard like things are maybe not great with Tyreek in the Miami locker room. And it just seems like maybe far-fetched that he ever gets back to a 1,700-yard season. And last year was certainly kind of a wake-up call with him. And we also dropped guys like, I don't know, who were some of the older vets? Chris Godwin, maybe some skepticism about the recovery. And now with Emeka Egbuka there, Stephon Diggs, who, with his boat escapades might have put himself on maybe slightly less firm ground in New England. But we did bump up your guy, Rashad Bateman, a little bit.
Yeah, wide receiver
spots.
60, that's probably too low.
Yeah, I think we were just realizing he, pretty good season last year. He turned into kind of a splash play guy. I don't know what DeAndre Hopkins' arrival does to Bateman. Like, I don't think he's going to be a high volume target earner anyway, but it was good to see something from him, and maybe that was part of why we moved him up a little.
Todd Monken said earlier today that he doesn't view Hopkins as wide receiver 3. He views it as the team has 3 starting receivers for whatever that's worth. You can read into that however much you'd like. I would say for me, I actually just said this. I was taping a show earlier with Erickson and Jake Seeley. And this is from a redraft perspective, but you can, I think, apply it to Dynasty too. I really don't want a lot of Ravens on my teams this year. Obviously, Lamar, amazing. Derrick Henry, amazing if you're a contender in Dynasty. I'm not really buying at cost a lot of Zay. I'm not buying at cost a lot of Mark Andrews. I'd be very interested in Isaiah Likely as a Dynasty guy. I mean, he's tied in 13 in our trade value chart. And I think that's appropriate because he and Andrews are both not under contract after the season, so they might not even both be in Baltimore anymore. If Andrews gets hurt at all, Likely's going to be a top 6 tight end every week. Like, I really like that one. But I'm not buying Zay. I'm not buying Hopkins. I'm not buying a lot of Bateman. I just think there's not enough footballs to go around to feed all these. This is a team that, outside of, we know when they're in close, they want to get as many touchdowns as possible to Derrick Henry. Outside of that, I think this team wants to spread the ball around at every opportunity, and I'm not buying them for a lot of dynasty value. So I do think wide receiver 60, I would be interested in Bateman at that level because I do think the talent's there, and he's feels like finally healthy for the first time in his career. But in general, I think that's an offense that's going to be really difficult for dynasty value moving forward, honestly.
Yeah, we saw Lamar pass at a hyper-efficient level last season, and yet who among his pass catchers was truly valuable? Like, obviously, Derrick Henry was really valuable, but Zay Flowers, I think, was maybe considered a slight disappointment. Bateman was just really unpredictable. Like, you couldn't start him every week and count on him. Mark Andrews had that horrid start where he was like outside the top 30 in fantasy points per game among tight ends through 5 weeks and then scored 11 touchdowns in 12 games. So like it was pretty dicey with the pass catchers last year, and that was with Lamar Jackson just totally clicking. Didn't he set a new career high in TD passes last year? I mean, he was just hot fire, but we know the Ravens are always going to run the ball.
It was one of the greatest quarterback seasons statistically in NFL history, and Andrews caught a bunch of touchdowns in the second half of the season, but even he didn't have a lot of receiving yards, and nobody else was a true standout. Zay had that month in the middle of the season where he was excellent, but that looked like kind of the outlier. I mean, I'm just looking at the names around him. He's surrounded by guys: Rome Odunze, Egbuka, Worthy. I'd rather have all those guys than Zay, honestly, on a dynasty roster.
Yeah, can make that case. The only thing is, he's going to be around for a while, and I don't know.
I like Zay the player. I'm worried about the fantasy consistency.
Yeah,
agreed. That's my problem. The player, I think, is very, very good. If you want to evaluate your trades with confidence, you should use the FantasyPros Trade Analyzer. Instantly see the impact of trades on your team and get expert recommendations. Whether you're making a 2-for-1 deal or swapping a couple draft picks for that stud who will help you win now, the Trade Analyzer will help you optimize your roster and make smarter decisions. Try the Trade Analyzer today at fantasypros.com/myplaybook and dominate your league. So we'll go ahead and wrap up there. We'll keep this rolling every month like we do all year long. For Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll see you again next time.
Thanks everyone.